Otherwise, I would see you.
All right, good morning, everyone. It's about time to get started here. Thank you for coming. My name is Stacey Wilson. I'm at Mesa Community College, and I'm here with my Mesa colleagues, Dr. Alex Farragine, Jennifer Fay, Kathy Mead, Suzanne Cordero, and Belinda Weiss. And our respondent today is going to be Dr. Elizabeth Wardle from Miami University. We're going to leave some time at the end of the session to take any questions. We're excited to talk everybody today about inventing a WAC program at a community college, and then to also talk to you about the unlikely partnership that helped us do so. I will say as we get started that a lot of the insights that we're sharing are empirical in nature, but with that said, all of this work has been done at Mesa. We really do think it'll resonate with everybody in the room, and that will be transferable to other contexts, especially community colleges. So I think a good place to start.
It didn't work yesterday either, Stacey.
We're working from it. Good place to start is going to be just in the first year composition classroom. And I think that's a space that likely most of you are familiar with, or you work with people that are coming from that space as well. Alex and I have been teaching first year comp for a lot of years, 10 years, 15 years. And during that time, we were aware of the scholarship on knowledge transfer, a lot of it coming from Dr. Wardle. And from that space, we started to make changes both in our curriculum and pedagogy. But it was clear to us, as it is to most first-year comp instructors, that in order to truly help our students develop as writers and meet their educational goals, that we really needed to participate in the first-year classroom. And so that was our motivation, is to seek out those partnerships. A common story, common reality at a lot of community colleges that there was no existing WAC program there to help us do that work. So although, again, a common feature of community college teaching is Alex and I were both teaching a 5-5 load. We were responsible for other committees, the department, the college, the district. And with that said, we were so committed. We wanted to make sure that we knew we needed to partner beyond the classroom. So we also realized that a lot of really smart people were out there doing that work, and we didn't have to start from scratch. And so as we did formal and informal research in the literature and at conferences, starting to pay attention about who was doing WAC work, what they were doing, where they were from, that led us to Dr. Wardle and the Writing Fellows program at Miami. And it was at that point that I want to pause as far as make that the takeaway that in this age of austerity, where a common thread we hear is there's no money, there's no resources, the budget is low and dwindling. This idea of seeking partnerships, I think, is one that we can all embrace in a way to still do the work and to thrive instead of having it be a hard stop when we hear that no funding the budget. So that idea of seeking partnerships is something that really we were able to lean into and help us get started in this WAC work that we knew was important. Partnership truly began. Oh, there we go. We started in first year comp, and then we were on a quest to get a little bit of help, a little bit of a leg up in creating a WAC program at our college. Like I said, most colleges don't have them, ours certainly did not. The partnership started with an email. It seems pretty simple, but sometimes that's where we stop. But the email was sent, Liz responded immediately, and the conversation started. She graciously answered any questions we had. She shared all the information about the Writing Fellows program, the WAC work at Miami. And by the end of it, she had invited us into the upcoming Writing Fellows cohort that was starting. So we definitely got to see behind the curtain, as it were. We got to see this in action. So we spent 2 weeks kind of shadowing the program. There was a summer cohort. And from that, we saw a lot of amazing things. We saw disciplinary teams come together. We saw them engage in the theory of threshold concepts, learning theory, knowledge transfer. They were in conversations within the disciplinary teams, and I'll pause because that's one of the key components of the Writing Fellows at Miami, is that nobody comes alone. That disciplines send teams of 3 or 4 or more, and they are able to work together. But then the other really valuable part is during those early days, the first 5 or 6 days of this 2-week program, they work across disciplines as well. And that's where a lot of insights really come from. I think days 6, 7, and 8 time. These teams are then given time to select an issue or problem that they're dealing with in their local space. They leverage the expertise that they come with because we know they come with a lot. And then they also leverage the knowledge and the experience and conversations that they've been able to take away from those first few days of the workshop. The last day, and then they have a project. So they have a project, they strategize a way to use all of this knowledge that they have to address that issue. And the last day is a showcase of sorts. So they are presenting to other disciplinary teams, and then also stakeholders are invited in. So other faculty that may have not been part of the program, department chairs, deans, vice presidents, are invited in to see the work and to hopefully help them then implement it, to implement that project after the workshop. So this was certainly something that was attractive to us. We wanted to definitely emulate this. We wanted to take it back to Mesa. And for Liz, as she opened up those resources and that information and that curriculum to us, I think for her, but she can speak to this more, she knew that this program, the WAC Writing Fellows Program, was successful at Miami, but what she wanted to know was, would this translate? Would this curriculum be as successful at other institutions, at other contexts? And that certainly, Mesa was a great place to find that out, because as you can see, the context couldn't be more different. Mesa is one of 10 colleges in the Maricopa system in Arizona. We're a Hispanic serving institution. A number of most of our students are part-time and first generation, and you can see how that compares there to Miami. So would this Writing Fellows curriculum translate? We're going to find out. So the curriculum was certainly one mediating factor that we wanted to examine, and there was some translation that had to be done there, but we realized very quickly that there were other mediating factors, and you can see here 5 mediating factors that we had to attend to in order to invent this WAC program. And so as we get into curriculum, again, was certainly the first one. We were fortunate to have borrowed curriculum. So again, we did not have to start from scratch, and that was very important to get us going. But we did, again, moving from Miami to Mesa, we did need to think about the disciplinarity of the faculty that we were inviting in to this space. At the community college, most of our faculty, yes, they're definitely grounded in their discipline, but primary focus is on that teaching piece. So we need to be attentive to that. We also have a large number of career technical educators. That is not necessarily the case at Miami. So we needed to make sure that we were explicitly inviting them in, that we were adjusting maybe some of the reading, the prompts, the activities to ask them to bring in their industry expertise and let them know that that was valuable. With those two elements, the fellows opened with the threshold concepts framework, and we gave that a little pause because we know there's another way to enter into those conversations about what are the ways of knowing, doing, being in your discipline? How can we name them, and that's naming them make them transparent to our students? So we had the Miami version with the threshold concept, but we also knew, and Lisa brought this up as well, that decoding the discipline and other faculty to name and unpack their curriculum, all in the pursuit of making it visible to students. So we considered a switch. We ended up staying with the threshold concepts framework, but I will say our second version of what we're calling the Literacy Partners Project, we'll get to that in a minute, we did bring in the decoding. So there was definitely some adjustments to the curriculum as we, of course, piloted it and then got feedback and then responded. The other piece here is this idea of the conception of literacy at your institution. Miami, the whole mission, and it says it in that Writing Fellows name, is to help faculty use writing to facilitate deep learning of their content. And that's absolutely what we wanted to do. That's where we were coming from, as writing to teachers. But in the community college, again, the population distinctly different from Miami. We have, yes, students coming directly from high school and AP classes, but we also have students that have been in school for 10 years or so. So we knew, and we had heard this, it's just been our experience and conversation, that reading was actually another key element that we needed to address at community college. And it's often one that is assumed, but we needed to emphasize it. So that was another component of that, of the translation from that Miami curriculum into the community college. And that goes into the naming piece that we'll come to here a little bit. So just two components of elements to think about as we were doing the translation work of the writing fellows to in Miami to make that. Another mitigating factor that we immediately had to attend to, we thankfully had the curriculum, we were constantly in revision with that, but funding, and I think that's familiar to everybody with any project. And again, here we are, you know, COVID, enrollment is low, that means the budget is low, that means there's absolutely no room, no money for any new projects. So we had to, again, in our institution, let's back up here and just talk about first, recognize authority. Where does that authority, who has the authority, who's making those decisions? Is it centralized? Is it decentralized? In Miami, Liz is the head of the writing program. She gets to make the decisions. There's the funding is there. That was definitely not the case at our institution. We started with by going to our WPA. We went to our department chair. We went to the director of the CTL. We traveled to all the deans that were there. Our VPAA, Mesa is one of 10 colleges in Maricopa. We actually contacted stakeholders at the district level as well. So the funding piece, a lot of the question asked is, where's the authority located? Who do we need to contact? And again, going back to the fact that all of them, we're saying there's no new money, go get creative. So one thing that you've all probably had to do, and we needed to do this and make it explicit, is to frame this, again, new project as something that was complementary and supportive of a number of other existing initiatives. So at our colleges, that means connecting it to Guided Pathways for Success, our first year experience. We have work-based experience coming on board. The DEI initiatives that were there. So there were a number of different existing programs that we needed to tap into so that we could then tap into the existing budget line. So we needed to make that clear. And that's likely anyone inventing a WAC program would need to think about those things with funding. From funding, we moved into recruitment, another mediating factor. So we had the curriculum, we had the funding really close, and now we needed to name this thing. And that's where I go back to, again, writing fellows just was not the name that was in a resume with our faculty. So we wanted to consider a few things in naming it, things that will likely be considered at your institution, but what is the institutional history or memory or vibe when it comes to WAC? We knew, and it had been one of our stakeholders even said it out loud, people are not going to get excited about that. So it may be the case like at our campus where WAC is either had neutral or negative connotation. So we stayed away from WAC. Then we wanted to consider, again, this idea of writing. So we've already said that we wanted to expand this. We probably had conversations with folks as well. I'm not a writing teacher. We don't write in this class. So we wanted to open that up, and that's where the literacy name came to piece. And then finally, from fellows, we changed that to partners. And that too, we wanted to signal from the very beginning that people we could expect that it was definitely about leveraging their expertise. We came with some ourselves, but that this in all spaces was going to be about a partnership. And that again, I think goes with this community college setting where we've got to all work together here to support student success. Recruitment as well, and you're going to hear more about this when we talk with our literacy partners a little bit. Something to think about in that invention of the new program is the targeted recruitment strategy. Likely we've all worked with faculty from across the discipline on different initiatives, different committees, different projects. So you know who your people are, you know who you can, yes, send out an open call for this new program, but also personalized conversations and emails. And those are really important. You know who your allies are. You're going to they'll be an easy yes, or they'll definitely be someone that will spread the word about this new thing that's happening on campus or in your district. So along with those allies, there's also a target to the different fields or departments that kind of have the buzz or give the attention, anything STEM related. People are going to pay attention to. CTE with a lot of support. So again, targeted into those departments, reaching out to the department chairs, any connections you have there, because they also typically have money with them as well, those particular departments. So moving on to a fourth mediating factor is this idea of navigation. And you can see how this goes back into every other theory that we have down here. Navigating territories. So here we are starting this WAC program. And we had to think about 3 different kind of overlaps. Our CTL department, they are in charge of professional development. So there was kind of this question of what are you doing this professional development out of our purview. So that was territory that had to be navigated. We had to navigate with our reading department. Mesa has a standalone reading department still. So again, we changed that name to literacy. That immediately got their interest, and also an inquiry about why aren't we involved? Where are we at? So there's some navigation that had to be done there. And then finally, they seem a little strange, but we also had to navigate our own English department. So particular to Mesa, again, one of 10 colleges in Maricopa, WAC comes on board, and there's again this, well, why aren't we consulted? Why is Mesa going to take the lead in this? And so we had to distance ourselves a little bit from the department. So it was not Mesa is taking the lead, but 2 faculty interested in this work are trying to get things started. So there was certainly some navigation of territories, and within that, some personalities you can imagine as well that you've got to be ready for. So mediating factor that you need to be, that needs to be addressed. Finally, that 5th year talks about sustainability. We talked about here going in knowing that from the beginning, and it pretty much was from the beginning. Yes, we're doing this development of the program, we're translating this curriculum that we've been given. We're researching, revising, we're recruiting, that's happening. And then at the same time, and almost on the same day, is this idea of you're always making a case for this program. That does not that you just get to run the track where we're just developing the program, we're going to do that, but at all times, you're always making a case with different stakeholders and with the different territories that you're navigating. We found it helpful that in order to kind of keep momentum going, knowing that it takes a lot just to do one of those things, much less to keep all of these gears moving, that to have a partnership, and that's where you're going to hear from Alex as well. And if you can, as you're inventing, think about where those people are positioned within the hierarchy of your institution as well, because that allows, again, some insights and access to stakeholders that one partner may have versus the other, and very much situated locally at our college, in our department. Alex has taken on a role at the district that definitely allowed him access and it really did help us grow this literacy partners program. You'll see the results here in a moment from year 1 to year 2. So a number of mediating factors that always have to be attended to. And because we were considering these from the beginning, it really did help us to grow this program. So from our first iteration, which was just the summer of 2022, we had 4 disciplines join us for this 2-week program, and we had 17 partners. Some of these faces likely look familiar here. We were able to offer this again just a month ago. So the second round of the literacy partner project, we had 10 disciplines, opened it up across the district, and we had 47 partners join us. So there was definitely some growth there, and that's where I want you to all actually be able to hear from some of our literacy partners. It over to that to introduce my colleagues there.
Awesome. Thank you. Can we move that camera so that it's over here? Stacey, do you want to just sit over here that way? No. Okay.
You to be in the picture? Not yet.
Probably never.
All right. Well, thank you again, Stacey, and thanks to all of you for being here. Yeah, I mean, I think that my name is Alex Ergin, and I am also her partner in crime here in trying to invent this program at our institution. I think a good way to begin here is just to, number one, allow our partners to introduce themselves, because we want you to hear from them. Oftentimes, you're hearing from folks like us who are trying to do this work, but I think it's so important for them, our partners, to be able to share, like, what was it about what we're doing that resonated with them, right? And so, so that's why I want to open that opportunity for them. So, if you would, as you introduce yourself, maybe what, if you can share with everyone, share with us, what was it that drew you first to this PD, to this, to what we're calling a Literacy Partners Project? So Jen, maybe we'll start with you and then kind of go around.
Okay. So as Alex said, I'm Jen Fay, and I am department chair over exercise science at Mesa Community College. Our name is actually not inclusive of who is part of our department. We have nutritional sciences, exercise science, recreation, dance, wellness, and health sciences. We are a fairly large department. We have well over 50 faculty, close to 60, most of whom are part-time, much like many other departments in the community college system. I would say that what drew me to this was connection and interest. I worked with Alex and Stacy on Maricopa's Guided Pathways for a number of years. And it was during this work that Alex introduced me to the idea of threshold concepts. Liz's book, Naming What We Know, actually informed the structure of our opening workshops for that pathway mapping work. And it was just a great experience, very powerful framework. But I really didn't know much about it as I discovered in the first LPP summer experience. A year or so following the conclusion of the Guided Pathways mapping work and my work with them on integrated reading and writing, Alex called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm sending a preview of an invite to this professional development experience that Stacy and I have been working on in collaboration with Liz for a couple of years. And we would love for you to come and bring some of your faculty, which of course, because of that relationship and my interest, I said yes. So that's how we do it.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay.
My name is Kathy Mead, and I am in the nursing department. I'm the assistant chair of nursing over at our Red Mountain campus. We have 2 campuses with Mesa Community College. And truthfully, what drew me the first time was that Suzanne here, who's my colleague, told me to come with her. And I will be very honest, that the first time I said, I'll come, but I really don't know what this has to do with what I teach. And that was how I really felt. However, it was very transformative. And after that session, in the fall of 2022, I developed a course that I feel like is very much in line, or we co-developed a course that really much is in line with the whole concept of naming what we know and how to help students to understand a concept. And so the purpose of that class was to go from nursing assistant to nursing, to help with the attrition and retention, to take them somewhere in between and help them to understand those concepts. So I think it was really helpful. And so naturally, the second time, I was raving about it and asked some of my counterparts at our other Maricopa colleges to come. I invited from my equivalent position of a nursing assistant program coordinator from 3 different campuses, 3 different colleges within the Maricopa system. And one of them was able to come, and it was so great having her insight, and she was amazed at what we had done the first year. And then our project for the second year, I feel like, was even better than our project for the first year. So I definitely think that once people understand what it is that you're trying to get them to do, they'll realize how significant and integral it is to all disciplines.
So I'm Suzanne Cordero. I teach paramedicine to RN transition. So I'm a nurse and faculty at Red Mountain campus with Kathy, and our, I call him our little elder. He's not old, but he's been in the nursing department since we were in nursing school. He emailed everybody and said, hey, I want you to do this, and you don't say no to him. And I said, sure. I had no idea what I was getting into. And then I emailed Kathy and I was like, hey, I'm doing this. I don't want to do it by myself, so you need to come with me. And I sat through the first one. It was a lot of information to take in, but then implementing it into the fall. And then in the spring, when we got the email that there was going to be what we call LPP 2.0, and I emailed Stacy and I said, is it okay if we come back And she said yes, and we were very selective. We had actually 2 different nursing groups, a Red Mountain nursing group and a Dobson campus nursing group. And we were very purposeful in our second round because it wasn't just, this is all of us. We have different culture and different programming at Red than we do at Dobson. And so the second round was very, very purposeful to be Red specific. And I think that being able to implement things that, because I am not an English teacher, I'm not a writing teacher. And when I was looking through my curriculum and it was lacking, it was easy to say after the first round to go, oh, I can just do this because this is what we learned. And to be able to implement things that were purposeful and helpful for my students to move forward was, and then the second round I think was even better than the first, because it was a review plus. And I think it was super important to do the second round.
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm Belinda Weiss, and I work in the fundamental section of Block 1 of nursing at Mesa Community College. And I too got recruited from Wes, and who pretty much said, you're coming to this. And what was interesting though, we feel like silos, right, in our department because we're so busy working with our students and with trying to make that difference in their lives. And so we don't get to mix with other departments within the college. So that was another reason though that I wanted to go, because I definitely wanted to do that work, and it was incredible. It was just, and definitely coming back to the LPP 2.0 is a must. Our project for the second time, which we'll talk about, is just amazing. And it's going to impact every block from the time they enter as a CNA all the way through paramedicine, and all the way through the blocks. It's gonna be great.
Awesome, thank you. One thing I guess as I'm listening to your answers, just Stacy talked about that targeted recruitment piece. And I mean, I think you're seeing that part of it, that there were people that we invited, even the Wes who invited you. We worked with him a while back in a research project where we asked him, hey, we need to talk to someone to give us an idea of how do nursing faculty conceptualize writing. And that was like 2 years before, right? And so we knew he was an ally for us, but we had no idea that all of a sudden he was going to be able to recruit everyone else over here. So that is interesting that all of you mentioned what drew you. It was a person.
Mhm.
You know, it was a person, and it wasn't necessarily the program. It was an individual who had made that impact. So anyway, so I guess my second question, and I think this question is important in terms of what was it about what Liz and everyone at Miami did? What was it about this curriculum that was so transferable? And so the question that I would love for you all to answer is like, what expectations did you have, right, coming into this initiative, into the 2-week program? Like, in what way were those expectations met? In what way were you like, oh, I got something different than what I bargained? And I think that as you answer that question, I think again it's important because oftentimes this is how when we're doing this WAC work and we're inviting them, I'm interested to hear about what did you want to come out of there, right? You have agency, you have needs, you have your own interests, and how are those met and or exceeded or not? So, and at this we can go down or just a couple of this. Okay.
Do you mind if I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so being from nursing, I'll be honest with you, again, because of the whole silo situation, I genuinely thought I'm going to go to this, this seminar and learn how to get my students to write better with charting and doing all the things that go along with, being a great nurse. And it was so much more than that, so much more. And it is going to have such a profound change with how our students learn, with the work that the interconnectedness and work that we're doing because of this LPP. I mean, not just the LPP piece, which was amazing, but also the work that's done because of the conversations we have with each other, like our working with the reading department, getting them to move over to our building, and we're working closer with them and helping our English as a second language students primarily. So
Thank you.
I had zero expectation. Wes said, come, I said, okay, I just thought I was gonna learn how to teach my students how to write. And it was such a different experience. At the end of the first one, it was a department-wide initiative where we were taking a reflective writing journal, and we were moving it through the semester. So we had an entry point either with Kathy or myself, and then it would move into the core classes. And then the second time, it was very specific to the needs of the students that we have at Red, that we serve at Red. And we collaborated with a Red specific initiative, and moving forward that we've shared with Dobson and said, hey, you can tweak this however you need to tweak it. And we had pulled in some resources, but not only that, but the first semester we partnered with reading, and now reading is embedded with nursing. And the second, we met some really awesome people from psych and English and education, and we're collaborating again with all of us. And they're saying things, I'm like, oh, we teach that, we just call it this. Oh, we teach that, we just call it this. So being able to recognize that as our students come to us, they've seen all these different spaces, and I can say, remember when you learned this in this space, this is what we call it now, and it's connected. And they're like, oh, so it's not reinventing the wheel.
Exactly. So it streamlines their learning.
Yeah,
basically.
absolutely, yeah.
And I'll agree with what Suzanne said. I had zero expectations because I came because Suzanne said come. And what I can tell you, the biggest takeaway that I had was collaboration, because we had this great ability. Like, I had never spoken to Belinda.
Right.
We've worked together for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I had never even had a conversation with her outside of just maybe like, oh, how are you doing? And which is shocking to me, considering that all of the students in my class feed into her class. You know, that seems like it would be a natural connection, but the way that our department meetings, the way that our system was currently set up, was not to foster that collaboration. And so while the expected outcome was yes, how to improve this with the students, because in my role as assistant chair, a big part of my job is also how to enhance programs and how to build and develop these things. And so I was like, well, look how beneficial this collaboration was, and chose to reach out and collaborate with other campuses, which is why the second time our Glendale Community College campus came, and our Scottsdale College would have come. However, her email got lost in the shuffle. So I know that the next time she's definitely going to want to come. And so I've had more collaboration with other colleges. And then in terms of grants and different partnerships that I've been doing, because of the conversations that I've had with the other departments, like in psychology and in these other areas, I realized that collaboration extends so far beyond just our learning objectives and how to help our students in our classes. But in general, it's like across the campus, how can we best help our students? Because if we're all calling something, we're all doing the same thing, but calling it something else, there's got to be more ways to make those connections as a college in general. So
I agree with all that they've said.
it's hard to be blessed.
I know. I knew I would be challenged. So when I got into it, I knew I'd be challenged with developing professional concepts. That was my interest of learning more about the framework. I don't think I read the invite carefully, that this was actually also going to be about writing. And so I got the Google form that asked, you know, how do you describe clear, good, or good writing? What does it look like to you? And I thought, oh no, I didn't tell the 3 colleagues that I convinced, one of whom was coming all the way across from Glendale Community College, you know, an hour drive every day, that this was also about writing. How are they going to react to this? But they were okay with it. They trusted. And I thought the writing piece would be more about probably, you know, tips and tricks to support my students in becoming better writers, or tips and tricks to reduce our anxiety about grading, all that writing. But it was the only expectation that was solidified was we did draft disciplinary threshold concepts, and it was a fabulous process and really a threshold crossing moment for myself with regards to my own understanding of my discipline, really deep reflection. But all other expectations were upended. As they've shared, I think I speak for my colleagues, both in version or round 1.0 and 2.0. 2.0, we had not 4 faculty, but 9 come with me. It was so deep. right? To have that deep disciplinary, or that deep reflection on your disciplinary expertise, it's pretty mind-blowing, actually. Looking at, and I used to hear Alex and Stacy say this all the time. What lens, we've talked about this in guided pathways, and it really helped, but I don't think I fully understand, what lens do you want to see the world through? Or do you want your students to see the world through, I should say, when they leave your classroom? And that didn't really make sense to me until I sat down with Mona Scott in sociology and I saw the lens through which she saw the world, which had a lot of similarities, but differences between us and exercise. The lens through which nursing, which there are a lot of similarities, but there are some key differences. So when, Kathy walks into a room, she's looking for different things. She's looking, at how somebody, their temperature, right, and their signs and symptoms of distress, whereas I'm looking at their glucose meter and muscle activation, right? And Mona is looking at the sociological imagination that somebody might have. So that was really powerful, that partnership and learning across differences, or learning across disciplines, I should say. Also examining the bottlenecks in my discipline and my own blind spots was very powerful. I realized that I wasn't unpacking as much as I thought. And really looking at what I privilege in my class and whether or not what I actually privilege aligns with what I expect students to know and be able to do when they leave my classroom. So many more things I can describe, but those really hit home for me. And in some, it was really the most transformative, not transformational, but the transformative professional development experience I've had in 20 years of teaching.
Thank you. I mean, as I listen to your answers, it's interesting, because I'm sure if you're running a WAC program somewhere, sometimes it's easy to think, okay, what is this thing that is related to writing that we can offer our faculty across the curriculum? But as I hear all of you talk, it's amazing that what you enjoyed about this, yes, it was some of the writing conversations we had, but that it created the conditions and space for collaboration. And that had nothing to do with the scholarship of writing as much as it was, you just needed a space to sit down and sense make. And I think that to me was something, as I'm hearing it, it was, I knew it, but I don't think I appreciated it as much until you all were talking about it. And that's why I know we've had so many conversations about, there's so many, even within the program, the curriculum, we want to focus, there's certain things we got to get through the content, and then sometimes we just have to stop. And she reminds me so much, they need to talk. They need to continue to talk to each other, right? And because that's the nugget that really transformed a lot of what you all are talking about. So anyway, just something that came out as you all were talking. For the sake of time, what I want to do is give you all an opportunity to come and describe the project. You all went to, you were there the summer of 21. You were just, or 22, and then you were also there summer of 20, just this past summer, right, 23. Can you talk a little bit about, after those 2 weeks, what was the project that the two-week workshop informed, and where it is now? What were some of the obstacles? Because I think there were certainly obstacles to implement these projects. Because that might have some insights for us in terms of how do we facilitate that work as well. So just maybe start with Jen, where the project and so forth, and take that.
Okay. So we had two goals for our project. One of our major project goals was to apply what we learned to improve the accessibility of our discipline, or disciplinary ways of knowing for all students. That was really important to us. It's actually one of our wildly important goals as a department. And do that within our own classroom. There's only 4 of us, right? So what did that mean for us? Making the implicit explicit, really unpacking and decoding ourselves and our bottlenecks and our expert blind spots, continuing that work that we started in LPP. And then also, which I forgot to mention this, like the surprise was that I walked away viewing writing in a whole different light. I often viewed it as an end product. And this, I think, was deeply ingrained. I mentioned earlier at breakfast today, my father actually taught freshman year composition at Central Arizona College. And I would hear in the 80s about writing across the curriculum. Oh, we need writing across the curriculum. Dad, what are you talking about? So, but I always viewed it as an end product. But seeing writing through a new lens of writing fosters deep learning was so powerful for me. And I'm embarrassed to say that, you know, it took me 20 years to get there. To really truly make sense of that and understand that I actually use writing to foster deep learning all the time. I use writing to mediate activity all the time. And why would I not give that to my students, right? Why would I say, well, we'll just, and if we have time, we'll talk about my journey to where I arrived today, but why do Alex and Stacy have to quote fix them in fresh humor composition before I actually assign some meaningful writing? So that's one commitment that we all made to each other, the four of us, is that we had this acronym actually, CTC. We would no longer continue to teach crappily. And we it was our mantra. Jokingly and lovingly, right? There's a little bit of humility there. But we would basically, again, unpack our disciplinary expertise, and we would unpack our writing assignments, talk to students about the genres in which we write, how they differ from our colleagues in other disciplinary areas. And sometimes there isn't a genre, right? We wouldn't need to talk about conventions. I literally just want you to respond and demonstrate your learning, but making that very explicit. And using writing as a means for developing deep learning. All of us incorporated a lot more writing, informal writing, outside of class, inside of class, individual, small group, large group. And I will tell you from my own personal perspective, I actually just tackled one unit just to take this slow and really, I wanted to actually see, in talking to Stacey and Alex, I wanted to see what kind of change this would have. So, and I will say that this experience also impacted teacher talk. So I unpacked one unit, my disciplinary expertise for one unit. I looked at how I could incorporate writing more informally throughout. And I had one essay question that I had in an exam and out of an exam and in an exam because of my struggle of the writing, you know, because the writing was often on that essay question, nonsensical. And I tried all the teacher techniques from Freyer models to think, pair, share, to flip the classroom, to ill-structured problems, to a fun bean activity. And I would see a movement of the needle on that particular challenging question that really summed up that unit, but not where I wanted it. It fell short of the goal. So after implementing this, one, and my teacher talk changed, two, my assignments just naturally became more authentic. And I will say this, the hardest work was unpacking myself. The easiest part was then developing the assignments and the assessments and the assessment was already there. It was an ill-structured problem. They just weren't hitting the mark, and it wasn't them. I wasn't hitting them. So after unpacking myself, the performance was phenomenal. I shared the results with Alex and Stacy on the essay question. The writing was brilliant. I really didn't have to do much adjustment of their writing in class. It came because I removed that cognitive overload of learning a new disciplinary language, understanding these deep concepts. The specific topic was energy systems and fatigue, which is very hard for students to wrap their head around. All of that was removed and they could write. 12 years of education actually showed through in their writing, right? So the other major goal of our project was change. We saw the value in this, all four of us, even the brand newbies who are kind of like, what did Jen Fay bring us into? I really don't know what we're doing, but we'll just go with it. We all saw the incredible value of this work after the end of the 2 weeks. And so we made a roadmap to change for our department. And we basically mapped out our ultimate goal was to get people to LPP 2.0. That was our ultimate goal. How do we get people there? And so we engaged, being chair of my department, I have access to all the people, and I engaged our department in a series of collaborative inquiry sessions around the very readings that Alex and Stacy shared with us. Alex and Stacy came in and facilitated a few sessions. I think there's a question that we might talk about later about challenges. I can talk to you about those challenges. It wasn't easy, but the good news is we got 9 individuals. So that was pretty exciting.
Thank you. Yeah, so you had your project, again, it's one definitely in your classroom, the other one department-wide project. Yeah. And again, you probably speak to 2 projects, right? So can one of you talk about that first project, what came out of that first year, and then where you are in that, what came out of this year, I guess?
I'll talk about the first one if you guys want to cover the second. Sure. Okay, so the first year we took a look. unpacked our situation and decided that we wanted to utilize a project we currently had been using, but make it more purposeful in nature. And so after we discussed with each other, you know, as far as supporting our students and helping transfer the knowledge to the real world, we decided that as the students progress through the blocks, one thing that happens is they mature and gain the knowledge that they need to become a nurse. They become a little bit more, I don't want to say jaded, but a little bit more, it is jaded. Yeah, it is what it is. So they become a little bit more jaded. So what we wanted to do is remind them, once they got through CNA, block 1, paramedic, block 2, 3, 4, when they got to block 4, the final block, right before they become a nurse, take the boards, and they're at their peak period of possible negativity, right? And they're just done with school, to be honest. Bring this assignment of why I want to be a nurse, right? In block 1, we have an assignment, why I want to be a nurse. But instead of just having it a isolated assignment that they do, it's done, it's in the past. Now what we're doing is we're making it more purposeful. We're bringing it back in block 4 and say, reread this. Why you wanted to come here in the first place, why you wanted to make a difference in people's lives, and re-inspire their fever and passion for nursing, right? And it hasn't been long enough for us to see the full accumulation of that because it's just been 2 semesters. But I will tell you, there has been a couple students from block 3 that were impacted from the first session that have came to thank us for reminding them why they got into nursing to begin with.
Yeah, and one of the things I'll say, because I remember when you all talked about that project, it really stemmed out of your work in that first LPP, where you identified clinical judgment as a threshold concept. And so the question became, how do we help students develop and engage in that threshold concept across our program?
Right.
And so we were so excited when you said, hey, you know what? So in many ways, this particular assignment that you're talking about was really a way to assess their identity, right? How much were they able to over the 2, 3, 4 years, however long they're in the program, change to eventually emulate or start enacting a lot of the dispositions and values that you were looking for. So anyway, it was based within that threshold concept. So,
And the challenge of that, though, is that although there were several stakeholders at the table, there were not 3rd and 4th semester for nursing program at the table. And we have autonomy. We have a district curriculum, but how you get through that curriculum is your choice. And so as we brought it back to a department, we said we did all this work and we did all these beautiful things, and we have different prompts in NA, we have different prompts in paramedicine, we have different prompts for 1st and 2nd semester. We would like you to create this same space in your semesters, and it was met with a brick wall. And so although we are continuing to do the work, it didn't move forward into 3rd and 4th semester. So what happens is we do the work and then it kind of dies off in 2nd semester, but they still have it. It evolves through 2nd semester, and then it becomes, they have to look at it because there's no longer prompting in 3rd and 4th semester. Although in the summer, we did get 4th semester to come to 2.0. So we're hoping that space will live again in 4th semester.
Yeah, we're excited
And we're
about it.
hoping that 3rd semester will come to 3.0. But that was kind of a challenge for us in that, because our first 1.0 was a big department initiative where we were all trying to connect and move them forward in our discipline. And then for 2.0, we were separate, but our our projects were very, very similar in that we needed to get them to a space where they could do writing in a nursing way, so charting, understanding, and we did continue with clinical judgment. But clinical judgment, we smashed down into all the little bits and pieces. And really for our campus, the bits and pieces are recognizing cues, which is a baseline understanding. If you walk into a room and you go, "Ooh, that's not right," or "That's not right," and how you understand doing that with report back and forth. So we have oral report, we tell you all the things, and then you're supposed to know from that report what questions to ask. So for red, we broke that process down into a piece of paper that has boxes and you can check mark. And if you haven't check marked, you know, are they pink? Are they breathing right? Are they on oxygen? Like just basic things. And then put it into a reflective questions. After you got report, what were you thinking? What were your questions? Did you ask them? Who did you ask them of? The second step was, okay, once you saw your patient, did that thought process change? Because what you hear might not always be what you see. And so we were breaking down this really basic concept of a report, which everybody gives and gets, into a space where they could check a box, write down some words and go, oh, okay. And then they can move forward and we can utilize it in all of the spaces that we teach at Red. And then we shared it with our Dobson campus and said, hey, this is what we created. And then your 2.0 was very, very similar
Yes.
in
I'll
that space of, hey, they need to be able to see, they need to be able to
Mhm.
reflect, they need to be able to know these things, because our culminating test is called the NCLEX, and they fixed it to next generation, which is all application.
Mhm.
So they have to be able to read a scenario and go, oh, that's wrong. Oh, that what would I do with this? Or, you know, be able to recognize something is off and then translate that into what they're supposed to be doing next. So if you want to talk to your 2.0.
Yes, it was, so you guys shared yours and we showed you ours. One of the challenges was when we're trying to focus on how we can make a huge difference with our students and how to streamline processes, basically. There are, when we're gathering those cues and analyzing them and the signs and symptoms and the disease processes and what the nursing interventions are going to do, right? Helping organize that data was a key point for our 2.0. So what we did was we created a template that is now going to be utilized all the way through the program. So the students now have one template instead of 100, and it's the same one that we use. And it is everything that a quality nurse needs to know on one document so that they can start it in block one and it transitions all the way through, because we do layered learning, right? So we teach concepts over and over again and then add things each block. Then they could just add those pieces when they get to block 2, block 3, and block 4, right? And by the time they're ready for NCLEX, they're ready to take the test. Yeah.
One thing, so it's interesting that especially in this project, you were describing how you were really trying to make that discipline, your discipline, accessible to your students. And that was something that from the very beginning, I remember you mentioned that, Liz, and that I remember caught my attention, but I wanted to see that operationalized. And what you're talking about, that template, you know, they're using writing, but the template itself is just, hey, how do you think like blank, whatever blank might be? And so it's a question of transparency and accessibility. So for the sake of time, I want to pause our discussion here, and I want to give Liz, I want to give you a chance to kind of give us your take on what you hear, your thoughts on, what you wanted to do with this particular fellows program in Miami, and you've now heard its evolution here. So yeah, give us your thoughts.
Hi.
So interesting to hear this. I guess what I want to do is like zoom back out about why we were trying this project in the first place. And I feel like what you all are talking about sort of illustrates, because I think we just have a larger problem in universities and higher ed right now in general, which we're going to talk about later at our session at 3. That, we've really moved toward an accountability regime, and sort of it's all about, show me, prove that you all are doing your job and that, you're following these guidelines so that your institution can get funding. And so Randy Bass talks about that as a disintegrative model, where it's sort of everybody's in the silo and you're just trying to get your students to, demonstrate that they've learned something that they can regurgitate. And so what we were trying to do when we piloted this on Miami in 2017 is say, well, what would it look like if we sort of try to do something revolutionary around deep learning? So instead of giving into that narrative, what would it look like if we sort of activated and empowered faculty to act from their expertise toward deep learning? And so what I was really trying to do was figure out what's a sort of a heuristic or a method to give faculty the power to do the thing that they joined higher ed to do in the first place, which is encourage deep learning. And so what we were really trying to do was say, we think that they could do this if they came in teams, because a lot of WAC historically has been one person, one assignment, or one class, which is important. But if you have a deep, deep problem with disintegrative learning in an accountability regime, one person, one assignment, one class is not going to change that. And so what we were trying to do was say, well, what would it take to actually intervene that systemic problem? And so we said, you have to come in teams, and there have to be teams from multiple disciplines working together across time, because we know that 1 hour, one time is not going to do really anything. And so we also thought, it's not tips and tricks that's revolutionary, it's having people think in a new way about something and bring their own expertise to the table. So that was the model that we developed, and it worked really well at Miami. We've been doing it since 2017, and so teams of faculty have been coming, and they say things very similar to what you all have said, which was, our philosophers said, being with other people like me and having to check what I know with people totally different from me was really, eye-opening. And so we know that it worked. They were able to use the threshold concepts lens along with learning theory and also genre and writing theory, and then work on a project. But much of what you all have described is the same issue that we faced as well, which is how do you get teams to come? Who's on the team, right? Because if no one with any power is on the team, then you go back to your department and they're like, whatever. Or if the chair's not there, you go back to the department, there's no space to continue the conversation with your department. So some things that we've learned since we first did this was it really, not just how do you recruit people to come, but how do you recruit the right people to come? And then how do you support the change making work across time afterward? Because what we learned is, like, if you can get the curriculum right and give people the space to act from what they know with these new lenses, like they're on it. They're just do all kinds of really cool, amazing stuff. But then they go back to their programs and their departments, and all sorts of things are required of them that normally faculty don't have any experience doing, right? What you're actually asking your teams to do is go back to their department and totally transform the teaching and learning across the entire program with authority and expertise that's leadership that comes from the ground up. It's not positional authority, it's another kind of authority. And so we've learned, and this is Mandy, who's our assistant director of WAC, what we've learned together is that this is the first piece, and then the second piece is supporting these teams as they go on to continue to do the work. And what does that look like? And so I think at Miami, we have every affordance. We have a $15 million endowment. We have a huge staff. We have faculty who are rewarded for good teaching, but who are also rewarded for research. So we sort of have like every single affordance. And it's still a huge challenge for us to say, hey, after you come and transform your own ideas as of 3 of you, how are you going to go back to your department and do that? And so we've really spent a lot of time thinking about what's the role of a professional development and WAC program in that long-term effort to make deep change around learning in the departments. And so we're still, I mean, I wish I could say we had an answer to it, but we've really been exploring, like, how do you actually continue to support that? And the reason I bring that up is we have every affordance and we have time. You all are teaching 5-5 loads and you don't have a formal WAC program. And so I just think that as a field, if what we're trying to do, and I would say that what we should be doing is really thinking about a revolution around how teaching and learning happens in a world that is really about, you can see it in every state legislature right now, right? It's not just about disintegrative learning, it's also about really oppressive learning environments. And so how do we empower our faculty teams to really create a revolution around deep learning. And so I think that the job of WAC programming is to do that. But if you don't have an official WAC program, if you have two people who just said, we're teaching 5-5 loads, but we want to make this happen, right? How do we do that? And so I think that sort of the premise of this entire panel was, we don't do it one institution at a time. We have to do it by uniting across our institutions, because some of us have affordances that others of us do not have, but together we can actually figure out how to do this work. And so it isn't just that Stacy and Alex took what we had been doing, but now we've learned in response to what they did about how to transform some of what we've been doing to bring in maybe more kinds of people that would have been at the table before. But I think that now the next step, I think the question we're asking ourselves is, how do we continue that revolution beyond one institution? And so for me, it's not like, hey, everyone go use the Miami model. I don't care about that at all. What I care about is, we're in a policy, in a policy regime right now that's all about suppressing deep learning and all about taking expertise and authority away from teachers. And how do we unite together? And do we get a heuristic and a method where we can work together in order to work sort of from the ground up and quietly? Like, I would be thrilled if no legislature ever took note of our Miami website or our programming. I don't need them to look. I don't need them to say, oh my God, what y'all are doing is like deeply revolutionary around social justice. I am fine with them not knowing, because that gives us the space to actually do something revolutionary around deep learning. But we can't do it alone. We've got to work together across our institutions. And I loved your slide showing Miami and Mesa. We really could not be more different. But I think those are the connections that are going to help us make transformation together. But it's a challenge, and your day-to-day constraints make it harder, because with the 5-5 load, where do you find the space? And so I do think that those of us who are at institutions who have named WAC programs with funding, I think have a responsibility to try things out and test them, and then put them into some sort of package where others can work with us, so that they don't, because you all didn't have time to invent something from the ground up, but when you had something to work with, you made it work for your institution. So I don't know if that's a response that you wanted.
No, that's no, I think that's no, and I want to open up to questions that you all might have here, but yes, one of the things that I learned through these last couple of years is that WAC work is so much more than just what I thought WAC work was about. And I think you just described that. Because, one of the things that Stacy mentioned is these two parallel tracks. And I spent a lot of our time in this track of working within the institution, within the hierarchical structure of that institution, that takes us away from the work, the day-to-day work of WAC work. But that work that you're describing is really needed. But again, when I thought about WAC work before, that work, I didn't see it, but we lived it, and then now I see it, right, for sure. So let me just pause there. Any comments or questions? Yeah.
Sure. First, I want to say thank you all for presenting. I appreciate your coming from your very different disciplines. I thought this was a really useful and interesting panel. I've worked with a few community colleges to try to help them think through WAC programs. And it's a real challenge for all the reasons that you talked about. And it's, I think, a testament to both program and the conceptual theoretical framework that it's working at your institution, which is lovely. I just want to say, I think it would be wonderful to be able to write this up, obviously.
We're working on it.
Because I think other community colleges would really benefit hearing about the success. In a lot of ways, they may or may not choose to use this model, but they could learn ways to create change at their institutions that they may not have thought possible, right? Even if they don't choose to do it in this particular style. So I thought it was a nice presentation.
Thank you. Yeah.
Can I add
Yeah,
something?
yeah.
There's one other layer of challenge that is a roadblock when you talk to community college faculty. And the fact that we, like in my department alone, like I said, we have close to 60 faculty. Only 6 of us are 5/5.
Right.
6 out of the 60
Or what?
are full-time.
Full-time.
The rest are part-time.
Yeah.
So there's that immediate, well, we're not going to make that large of an impact.
Yep.
And how do we bring our part-time faculty into the fold? And I think, this process I had, when we met, it was our 4 were 2 and 2, 2 part-time, 2 full-time faculty, 1 from GCC, 1 from Mesa, and then my 2 of my part-time faculty. The experience spoke for itself. They were actually my largest proponents of saying, come to these collaborative inquiry sessions, come learn more, come to LPP 2.0. And all but one of the new faculty came were also part-time. But it is a challenge in terms of finding the funding to make that happen, being very creative. I had to get creative because I was also told no in multiple avenues. I applied for the same grant that Stacy and Alex applied for, that's an internal grant, and I even have their guidance on how to change the wording so they might actually understand, you can't be a prophet in your own land. And they didn't understand. We didn't get the grant. That was one of our project goals. I then asked if I could use some budget that we had designated for this professional development experience and I was told no, they have to go through the normal professional development offered in Maricopa, nothing special. I ended up actually using wage saving in another area just to fund, and we just limited our work and made it very strategic.
I think that labor issue is really important. It's something that you don't have to be at a community college to have the labor problem. And it's something that we've noticed a lot at Miami is that we have teams who come with a lot. We don't do a lot of part-time faculty. We get around it by having visiting faculty, but they're still turning over. And so a lot of our departments were saying, like, we've come to fellows, we've made all this change, and then our department is just turning over constantly. And so a couple of the programs, what their project was making materials for the rest of their department. So Spanish, for example, has all these visitors coming and going. And so they were taking the project to make materials for the rest of the program so that when new people came in, they had these materials that helped usher them into the change making and theoretical framework that the rest of them had adopted. But that again, our field knows a lot about labor, but we're usually thinking like it's unethical to have so many part-time faculty. That's true, but there's a bigger problem too, which is you can't make deep change with a constantly shifting set of people because there's no coherence across time.
Absolutely.
And so we've got to, we can't radically change that, but we can figure out how to make materials to welcome new people in, bring them on board if the rest of the department has made these transformations. But that takes strategic thinking at the program level instead of just one person, one class, or one assignment.
Yes. Yeah, and infusing it into the culture and the way of being.
And that's still what we're looking at we said inventing a WAC program. It's not a program.
Yes,
we have
that's right.
this workshop. We have yet to have a program. And that's, again, we were just excited to get funding to run this 2-week session the first time.
Right.
And then we were excited to get it the second time. And now we're working on, can we get a little bit more, preferably time even than money as far as stipends or whatnot, to do some wraparound support, to think about, again, beyond those 2 weeks of being up there and facilitating. We really want these projects to be implemented. We want them to be used and useful. And we've had that guilt of like, we just didn't have the time to follow up and to do more and offer more. So we're still inventing this WAC.
And sustained, right?
Yeah.
Because 2.0 is guaranteeing that it's going to be sustained throughout.
So looking
Yeah.
for 3 point, yeah.
I know, we are, trust me.
One more, yeah, go for it.
Did the faculty, did the people participate, did they receive any kind of like stipend or funds or anything like that? Was that also available for part-time faculty?
Yes.
Yeah.
In my institution, we have a struggle with our School of Continuing and Professional Studies. A lot of part-time faculty, it's the only school at UVA that has any part-time faculty. But all of the funding structure does not work to assist any kind of stipend
Oh,
for
that's
somebody.
sad.
Yeah.
So we're doing all of these like weird workarounds to figure that out. So that was actually.
When I would say it was pretty brilliant of these two to integrate this professional development experience into something that was already in existence.
Yes.
Yes.
We have a longstanding Maricopa Summer Institute that is funded, and it had a slightly very different focus in years past, and it was very well supported. And they convinced quite easily our provost to make that Summer Institute this. So
And that was, again, ability to move from just Mesa. You heard us say we had representatives from all 10 of our colleges at the second LPP 2.0. And so that positioning from a college to a district space, and obviously a bigger budget as well. Yeah, so again, we talked about looking for initiatives and spaces that are already there, because it wasn't new money, it was already there, but it was ours for this year.
And we hope it's gonna be ours for
Yes.
going forward. So,
Fingers
I think we're out of time. Yes. Well, thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone, for being here.
Thank you.
Perfect timing. Look at that.